the quiet one in Buos. There were two kinds of people who walked into the police training academy: the ones who knew they belonged there and the ones who walked in so quietly. The air almost didn't notice Clara Jensen was the latter. She wasn't the storm. She wasn't the noise. She was the calm before it. The silence that people underestimate until it levels everything in its path. At 31, Clara had worked as a security guard at a local women's shelter. A job she took because she believed in protection, not control. Not intimidation, just plain "oh well, I got you." She had no military background, no fancy degrees in criminology, and definitely no six-pack abs. What she did have, however, was a burning reason that made her wake up before dawn every day. She wanted to protect people who couldn't protect themselves. She had watched too many women walk into that shelter barefoot, bruised and broken, some from fists, others from words. And every time one left stronger, Clara thought, maybe I helped. But that wasn't enough. She wanted more. She wanted to take the fight to the danger, not just patch up the aftermath. So, it a decision that shocked even her closest friends. She applied to join the SWAT training program. Yes, SWAT, as in the elite boots on the ground, high-octane. Tactic-crazy task force that made Hollywood look like kindergarten recess. The academy intake officer looked her up and down like someone inspecting a bicycle at a NASCAR race. "You sure you're in the right line?" he asked with a smirk, clicking his pen lazily. Clara didn't flinch. "If this is where you train people to stop evil, then yes, I'm right where I should be." The look of doubt she had expected raised eyebrows, of course. What she hadn't expected was the full-on rejection before she even got to prove herself. "You lack field experience?" the officer said, flipping through her application like it was a flyer for a yard sale. No military, no law enforcement. Record, not even competitive athletics. "This is SWAT, not a book club." Clara stood silently. "Besides," he added, "there are, physical expectations, endurance, tactical speed, the kind of pressure most people snap under." Clara again didn't argue. She simply looked him in the eye and said, "Let me train, that's all I'm asking." He leaned back. "Tell you what, you can join the basic evaluations. But if you don't meet the benchmark, you're out. No second chances. You won't even get through day one." Day one. Doubt served hot. The SWAT hopefuls were mostly built like Greek statues, carved by caffeine-fueled godsmen and women with sinew-like steel cables, jawlines sharp enough to file nails on. Then there was Clara. Her uniform hung a little looser. She had a softness in her gait and a gentleness in her eyes. She wasn't soft, just quiet. The kind of quiet that made people underestimate her. And that, as fate would have it, was her weapon. They ran 5 miles under the unforgiving sun. Clara ran all of it. Not first, not last. It's just steady. They scaled walls, dragged sandbags, and simulated urban rescues in full gear. Clara completed every task not with flashy strength but relentless consistency. Still, the whispers grew. Is she serious? She's going to quit tomorrow. Someone's mom get lost on the way to yoga class? But Clara? Clara just showed up again and again. Like gravity, the rifles came out by the second week. It was time for weapons evaluations. Now here's the funny part. Clara had never shot a gun until 2 years ago. Never hunted, never gamed, never owned a weapon. She took a beginner's course after seeing a mother at the shelter break down when her abuser got out of jail. In her, like a splinter in the soul, she got certified. Then she got obsessed. Clara would leave the shelter at night and head straight to the firing range, where she'd quietly outshoot men in camo who thought she was lost. She practiced in the rain, in gloves, at different heart rates. She once fired 500 rounds in a day to break her own hand stability record. So when they handed her the standard issue M4 rifle on the SWAT range, Clara just smiled. The evaluators weren't paying attention. In fact, some were busy timing the male candidate next to her, Rick, the Top Gun, who had already impressed half the academy. Then came the beep. Clara moved like memories move. Unassuming, efficient. Pop-pop. Transition, pop-pop-pop. Switch mag, breathe, pop, pop. She hit every single target clean. No wasted shots. The evaluators looked up, blinking. The silence was louder than gunfire. One of them approached. "Hold up, run that again?" Was that beginner's luck? Clara reset, ran it again, and broke the standing course record. On her second try, the shift people started to notice her now, but differently. Not as the oddball or the soft-spoken long shot, but as the woman who could dismantle targets like she was born with a scope in her eye. The whispers turned. Who is she? She did what? She might be the best marksman we've ever had, but Clara didn't let it get to her. She knew better. One good day didn't erase doubt. People would find new reasons to keep her down. But guess what? Clara didn't care anymore. She knew who she was. And more importantly, she knew why she was there. The pressure, ROM, by the third week of the SWAT training academy, the novelty of being underestimated had started to wear off. Clara Jensen was no longer the woman that people laughed about over lunch. She was now the one they whispered about during debriefs. The instructors hadn't said it out loud, but it was obvious in the way their eyes lingered when she walked into the range, in the way they subtly leaned forward during her fitness drills. What had started as curiosity was shifting, slowly but surely, into respect, quiet, cautious respect. But Clara knew better than to relax. Respect, especially when you're not what people expect, is as fragile as a thread in the wind. It only takes one mistake, one bad day, to watch it snap. The next phase of training wasn't physical. It was psychological. The pressure room was designed to do exactly what its name promised: apply pressure from every angle until the cracks surfaced. This wasn't just about whether you could handle a weapon. It was about whether you could make decisions under fire, whether your instincts would serve or sabotage you, and whether, when pushed hard enough, you would break. The first part of the test was sensory overload. They dropped the candidates into simulated hostage situations with blaring sirens, flashing lights, and actors screaming for help. Clara's team was tasked with clearing a building and rescuing a child while defusing to simulated threats, one hidden, one obvious. Timing mattered, accuracy mattered more. But what mattered most, the instructor said, was leadership. And that's where Clara hit her next walnut, because she lacked leadership. But because no one was willing to follow her, they paired her with Derek, the golden boy from earlier, and two others, Maya, a former Marine with a buzzcat and a chip on her shoulder, and Reggie, a second-gen cop with a loud mouth and quick hands. From the first second, it was clear Clara would be expected to keep quiet and follow orders. During the briefing, Derek stood up and took control without invitation, doling out tasks like a sergeant on a mission. Clara's job, according to him, was support. Nothing more, nothing less. But the moment they breached the door and chaos exploded inside the simulation room, Derek froze. A child's scream rang out, fake but convincing. Sirens blared, lights flickered. A hostage taker, an instructor playing the part, stood in the corner holding a prop weapon and shouting demands instead of pushing forward. Derek crouched behind a wall, barking orders that no one could hear over the noise. Maya moved on her own, attempting to flank the suspect, while Reggie took a wrong turn and triggered a mock explosive. They all failed to neutralize the threat. All except Clara, who had read the floor plan earlier and remembered the alternate entrance. She slipped quietly through a service corridor, calculated her position based on the sound patterns, and took a clean, simulated shot on the suspect just before the hostage would have been declared lost. The lights cut. The room went silent. Simulation ended. No one spoke then. A voice crackled through the intercom. Team 3, objective complete. But only one of you performed under pressure. They didn't say her name. They didn't need to. The others already knew. Later in the locker room, Derek approached her with a towel slung over his shoulder and pride still thick in his voice. You got lucky? That's all. Clara looked at him not with anger, but with something that scared him more. Calm confidence. Leadership isn't about barking orders. It's about seeing the whole field even when everything goes dark. Derek scoffed and walked away. But that moment planted something unshakable in Clara's core. For the first time, she wasn't just there to prove she could keep up. She was beginning to believe, truly deeply, that she belonged there. That maybe she had always belonged there. It was everyone else who was late to notice. The days blurred into each other after that, a haze of tactical drills, endurance trials, scenario planning, and debriefs. Clara learned how to clear rooms in under 10 seconds, how to spot microsignals of aggression in body language, how to rappel down walls with a 70-pound pack, and how to triage a gunshot wound using only the contents of her vest. She wasn't the fastest. She wasn't the strongest. But she never cracked, never buckled, and never gave up. What she did repeatedly was rise. Rise above the noise. Rise above the doubts. Rise every time someone tried to box her into a stereotype. And while she didn't seek recognition, it eventually found her. It happened one night during a surprise team evaluation, what the academy called red zone exercises. The candidates were woken up at 3:12 a.m., given 10 minutes to gear up, and dropped in a remote field in the middle of nowhere. The scenario was to simulate an ambush and recovery mission. Only this time, the twist was brutal. One of the team members would be assigned to simulate injury during the OP. The rest of the team had to carry them for a full mile while under timed pursuit. When Clara's team drew straws, the injured member turned out to be Derek. The look on his face when Clara offered to carry him could have soured milk. She wasn't the biggest. She wasn't the strongest. Yet she threw him over her shoulders in a fireman's carry without flinching, and she ran through thick brush, up muddy slopes over fallen logs. Her legs screamed. Her lungs caught fire. Her boots tore into her heels. But she didn't drop him. Not once. When they crossed the finish line, Derek was silent. It's not just because of the embarrassment, but because he had felt it, her resolve, her strength, her grit. All of it, undeniable now. Later that night, Reggie, who had once joked about her arms being decorative, caught up with her by the vending machine. "Hey," he said, scratching the back of his neck. "I thought you were just, here to test yourself. But you're actually making us better." Clara didn't say anything. She just nodded, cracked open her sports drink, and walked away. Because this wasn't about them. It never had been. It was about the women she used to protect with flashlights and locked doors. The ones who whispered thank you like it was an apology. It was about the moment she swore she'd be more. That she'd go from a guard at the door to the woman who led the charge. By the time the pressure room evaluations were over, Clara had done more than pass. She had shifted the ground beneath the feet of everyone who doubted her, but the hardest test hadn't arrived yet. Not the one where she'd face bullets, not the one where she'd face explosions. No, the hardest test was the one where she'd face herself, and it was coming soon. The ghost in her Citado W. The rain came in sideways that morning, driven by an angry wind that rattled even the most seasoned recruits. The training grounds were soaked in that particular shade of gray that only stormy days can summon, part sky, part memory. Clara stood at the edge of the obstacle course, water soaking through her uniform, her boots heavy with mud and the weight of what she hadn't said for years. It wasn't the weather that had her on edge. It was the name she'd seen posted outside the training room the night before, scribbled in thick marker next to a single word: mentor. The name, Captain Drew Rayner. Her heart had hiccuped at the sight of it, a soft jolt of dread she hadn't felt since her early 20s. She hadn't heard that name in nearly 9 years. Not since the incident in Juniper Creek. Not since the night she ran barefoot from a house she once thought would protect her. Not since the day Drew Rayner, then a field sergeant in a small county department, found her behind a gas station dumpster, shaking like a kicked dog and holding a broken phone and a bloody jacket. She remembered everything about that moment. His boots crunching gravel, the flashlight sweeping past her face, and the way he didn't ask her what happened. He didn't need to. He looked at her the way a seasoned paramedic looks at a wound they've seen 1,000 times. No need for diagnosis. Just triage. Fix what you can, stabilize what you can't, and carry the rest. Captain Rayner hadn't just been the officer who filed her statement. He had been the reason she got out. The reason she testified. The reason she believed in the idea that not all uniforms covered monsters. She never expected to see him again, especially not here. Not now, indefinitely. not as her mentor for the final stage of SWAT evaluations. He didn't mention the past when he walked in that day. He stood at the front of the classroom in tactical gear that had clearly seen more than training fields, his presence like steel wrapped in patience. He introduced himself the way every other mentor had, calm, professional, stripped of ego. One noticed how his eyes flicked toward Clara for a fraction of a second longer than anyone else. No one else saw her spine straighten, her jaw tighten, or the faint uninvited sting behind her eyes. "Final evaluations start now," he said, his voice steady but not harsh. "You've made it further than most. But that doesn't mean you're ready." He paused, then added, "We'll find out who leads when no one's looking. That's what matters in a real firefight." For the next 2 weeks, Rayner ran them through scenarios that pushed psychological and tactical boundaries. Hostage negotiations with deliberately confusing signals, building clearances with hidden friendly actors, firefights in simulated environments where they were given limited ammo and contradictory intel. The point wasn't just skill, it was instinct, control, and clarity under chaos. And Clara, she was good, damn good, but she wasn't sleeping well anymore. Not because of the drills, because every time she closed her eyes, her brain would replay that night behind the gas station, the smell of copper and asphalt, the burn of betrayal, and the steady hand that reached down without asking why she was broken. One night, after a long-range shooting exercise where Clara once again posted the highest accuracy scores by a wide margin, Captain Rayner called her aside. "You've improved," he said quietly, handing her a cold water bottle. Clara took it without speaking. The silence stretched between them, thick with memory. "Did you ever end up ... He trailed off, as if unsure whether to finish the sentence. "Talking to him?" She replied, her voice sharper than she meant. "No, I didn't go back. I didn't want closure. I wanted distance." Rayner nodded slowly. "Distance can be helpful," he said. "Sometimes you carry it with you, even when you think you've outrun it." "I'm not carrying it," she said too quickly. "I'm doing this for the people who don't get the chance to run." He didn't argue. He didn't have to. That was his way. He let silence do the talking, the same way Clara had learned to do. Not everything needs a dramatic confrontation. Some truths just sit there like stones in your chest, waiting for the day you decide whether to carry them, bury them, or finally throw them away. By the time the final team scenario arrived, Clara had become an unspoken leader in the group. Even Derek, who had once joked that she belonged in a bakery, not a breach unit, began checking in with her before making tactical decisions. The others followed her lead in the field, not because she was the loudest, but because her plans worked. Her logic was sharp, her moves clean, her judgment balanced. But the final test was designed to strip even that away. The simulation was brutal. Mock terrorist situation in a multi-story warehouse with moving hostiles, simulated civilians, zero visibility, and a timed extraction. Every candidate was given a choice: carry a live radio and lead the operation, or follow someone else and execute orders. Only one person would be evaluated on leadership under live combat simulation. The instructors picked Clara. She hesitated. For just a moment, not because she wasn't ready, but because being the one in charge meant every mistake would be hers. Every missed target, every injured civilian, every delay. All on her. And then she remembered the bruised women, the shelter, the crying child who clung to her leg, the words of a friend who had once said, "You can't protect everyone, Clara." To which she had quietly replied, "But I can try." So she took the radio. The simulation began in chaos. Smoke bombs, sirens, hostiles appearing in rapid, unpredictable patterns. Clara directed her team with laser clarity, calling out clearances, making snap decisions on breaches, navigating the terrain like it was her hometown street map. They neutralized threats, secured hostages, and reached the extraction point with 30 seconds to spare. She collapsed to one knee as the buzzer sounded. Her breath burned in her lungs. Her fingers ached. But she smiled, not because she had made it, but because they all had. Every teammate, every civilian, every piece of the puzzle intact. Later in the debriefing room, Rayner stood before the board with the day's performance results. He didn't address her directly. He didn't need to. Leadership is seeing the threat and choosing to step forward anyway, he said, tapping Clara's name with a marker. Today, you earned your place. No footnotes. No asterisks. He met her gaze, and for the first time since Juniper Creek, Clara let her shoulders fall just slightly. The weight didn't disappear, but it didn't crush her anymore either, because the woman who once hid behind a gas station now stood in a room full of warriors. And she wasn't just among them, she led them. The unbreakable quitter graduation was supposed to feel like a finish line, but for Clara Jensen, it felt more like the pause between breaths, the kind that came right before the next challenge. The training academy ceremony was modest, almost clinical in its structure. No parade, no confetti. Just a series of firm handshakes, names called into a microphone, and a quiet, unspoken agreement. You passed the test. Now go meet the real thing. When Clara stepped forward to receive her badge, there were no cheers or tears. Only the solid weight of the insignia in her hand, the thin, gleaming symbol of everything she had crawled, climbed, and clawed toward. And behind that polished steel, a promise. A personal vow to never again stand on the sidelines of suffering. But Clara's real test didn't wait long. Less than 48 hours after pinning her badge to her uniform, she was assigned to a ride-along with an active SWAT unit. It was part tradition, part protocol, first shadow assignment, where fresh graduates observed how field operations truly unfolded. Far from the buffers of simulations and resettable drills, Clara had been assigned to Echo Team, an experienced and tight-knit unit known for their precision and no-nonsense tempo. They operated like a single mind in multiple bodies, quick to deploy, slow to talk, and ruthless when necessary, Captain. Ortiz, the team lead, gave her a curt nod when she arrived at their staging facility. You're not here to impress anyone, he said, not unkindly. You're here to observe. Stay close, keep your ears open, and if things go sideways, don't try to be a hero. Clara simply nodded. She understood the weight behind his words. This was not a movie set. There were no foam bullets. No reset. Buttons. Here hesitation could kill. His judgment could cost lives. She knew that, and more than that, she respected it. The call came in just before nightfall. Armed standoff. Domestic disturbance turned volatile. Suburban residence. Mid-density area. Man barricaded in a house with 2 children, reportedly armed and unstable. Neighbors had heard shouting, a possible gunshot. Negotiators were en route, but tactical support was requested immediately. Echo Team moved like a tide, methodical and unstoppable. Clara rode in silence, sandwiched in the back of the van, her pulse steady, but her senses hyper-aware. Every pothole, every bump in the road, every clipped word on the comms hit her like signals from a world she was just beginning to enter. When they arrived, the situation was already tense. Patrol had locked down the perimeter. A thin line of crime scene tape flapped uselessly in the wind. The house in question was a squat, pale yellow building with drawn curtains and a closed garage. The front door was cracked slightly, like an open challenge. Clara followed protocol, staying close, observing from behind cover. Ortiz and his team set up a mobile command post, split into 2 breach teams, and began formulating a plan with the on-site negotiator. Every movement was exact. Every decision carved from experience. Then, as the negotiator attempted contact via loudspeaker, a second shot rang out from inside the house. Everything changed. Ortiz signaled a breach. No more waiting. The life of a child was possibly on the line. The team moved, and Clara stayed outside the perimeter as instructed, her earpiece relaying live chatter from inside. The words were quick, fragmented, tense. Left clear room. 1 suspect, not visible. Child located, non-responsive. Team needed, and then chaos. A second suspect appeared from a back room, previously unknown. Shots fired. A team member injured. The breach plan unraveled. Clara listened helplessly as the balance tipped. Then came a word she hadn't expected. Backup needed. It was Ortiz's voice, and he wasn't one to ask for help lightly.
Something.
And his tone was different, rattled, and what came next was worse. Their pinned front room collapse. Stexit blocked fire, starting, damn it, instincts. Overrode orders. Clara moved. No one stopped her. They were too busy scrambling to reorganize, too stunned by how quickly the scenario had turned. Smoke had begun pouring from the roof. The structure was aging, dry. One of the bullets must have hit a gas line or a heater. Every second now mattered. Clara grabbed a sidearm from the mobile locker, clipped her radio to her shoulder, and moved. Around the back of the house, her boots hit the wet lawn with muted force. She wasn't authorized to act, but she was ready. And ready sometimes beats authorized when lives are burning. She found a side entrance partially obscured by a toppled trash bin. Smoke curled from the edges. She pressed her palm to the door, hot, but not yet deadly. She slipped in low, staying beneath the smoke line. Her vision blurred, but she focused on the radio callouts. Still inside her T's down can't reach. Extraction points, child conscious, Clara traced the sound, stepping through hallways warped with heat. She found them huddled near the collapsed front room. Ortiz, blood streaked across his face. Camila, a veteran team member trying to control the blaze with an extinguisher. And in her arms a child, maybe 6 years old, coughing and crying, but alive, without hesitation. Clara took the child. "I've got her," she said, voice firm, despite the smoke in her throat. Ortiz looked up, confused and furious. "You're not supposed to. I know. But you're not dying in here." She shifted the child onto her back with a practiced grip and signaled Camila to help lift Ortiz. "Back window. Northeast room," Clara said, recalling the house. "Plan from the initial file. It's thin glass. We break through." Camila looked at her like she'd been running this team for years. Together, they moved, one room at a time. Clara kicked through the glass with her heel, shielded the child, and dropped onto the lawn with a roll that hurt her shoulder but didn't matter in the moment. They made it out. All of them. When the fire was under control, when the ambulances had come and gone, when the adrenaline began to drain, like the last drip of water from a cracked faucet, Captain Ortiz approached her. "I told you not to be a hero," he said, voice low, but not angry. "I wasn't," Clara replied. "I just couldn't watch a child die while I stood still." There was no ceremony, no medal, just the long look of a man who understood that protocol saves lives, but instinct saves. The ones you didn't plan for. Later that night, alone in her apartment, Clara sat by the window, sore and exhausted. But for the first time, she didn't feel like she had to prove anything anymore. Not to instructors, not to teammates, not even to herself. She was no longer the woman people doubted, or the survivor they underestimated. She was a protector, a leader. And she had become it not by raising her voice, but by knowing exactly when to rise without being told. The reckoning CAL, 3 weeks had passed since the fire. Since the rescue. Since the moment Clara Jensen stepped out of the burning house, not just carrying a child, but carrying the weight of her own transformation. In those short weeks, everything had shifted. Whispers turned into headlines. Internal murmurs became official discussions. Her name, once a footnote at the bottom of a candidate list, was now circulating among the upper echelons of department leadership with a new kind of gravity. The kind that clung to you when you were no longer just a trainee. They were now calling her a natural leader under pressure. News outlets picked up the story. They didn't know the full picture, of course, just the romanticized version. New SWAT graduate rescues child in blaze. There were grainy photographs of her carrying the soot-covered child, of Captain Ortiz being helped into an ambulance, of Clara's silhouette against the backdrop of a fire that, ironically, seemed to have baptized her into her new life. But Clara didn't care about the attention. She didn't want it. She had always done her best work in the shadows, in the quiet. And yet, the light was finding her, and it was relentless. It wasn't long before she was formally offered a permanent position on Echo Team. The announcement came via a simple email, marked confidential but buzzed through the office. Like caffeine in an empty stomach, The message was clear. The department saw her not as an experiment, not as an exception, but as an asset. She was in, fully, unequivocally. There should have been joy, gratitude, celebration, but all she felt was stillness. Because something else had arrived that same morning. A letter, handwritten. No return address. It had been tucked into her apartment mailbox, in a plain white envelope, marked only with her name. No rank, no title, just Clara. She opened it slowly, unsure why her fingers trembled. Inside, the handwriting was familiar in the worst way, small, slanted, and coiled like a snake ready to strike. Clara, I saw your face on the news. It's been a long time. I'm coming to the city. I'd like to talk. Before you decide you're done with the past, you still have something that belongs to me. Her breath caught. The edges of the world seemed to curl inward. It's like film in a projector catching fire. There was only one person that could be. Matthew, her ex, her abuser, the man whose violence had nearly snuffed her out. It's like a dying matchstick behind that gas station all those years ago. The man who put his hands around her throat while whispering that no one would ever believe her. The man she hadn't heard from in nearly a decade, the man she thought. She had erased from her life when she walked away from Juniper Creek with a police report and a cracked rib. Clara sat down on the edge of her bed, the letter still in her hand, and tried to make sense of the emotions crashing through her. Fury, fear, confusion, but most of all violation. Because that letter wasn't just words. It was a reminder that the past wasn't done with her. It was alive, watching, waiting she could report it. Of course she could. She could forward the letter to the department, to Captain Rayner, to anyone, and they'd take it seriously. But there was a part of her, the oldest, royest part of her, that recoiled at the thought of being someone's case again. Someone's situation. She had worked so hard to stop being defined by what had been done to her. She had built herself into something formidable, and now this. No, she folded the letter, placed it in an evidence bag, and locked it in the drawer with her sidearm. The next day, Clara reported to Echo Team for the start of her first official deployment cycle. Captain Ortiz didn't mention the promotion he didn't have to. Everyone on the team had seen the roster. Camila gave her a subtle nod of acknowledgement. Even Derek, who had become an unlikely supporter after the fire, bumped fists with her in passing. Their first operation was clean. High stakes, yes. A raid on an illegal weapons cache in an industrial district, but everything went by the book. Clara was assigned breach coordination, and she performed flawlessly. No casualties, no drama, just crisp execution and solid teamwork. But even with the success, Clara felt distracted. She hadn't responded to the letter. She hadn't told anyone. She hadn't admitted even to herself that the knot in her chest was growing. Tighter by the hour, it wasn't until the third day that she saw the second letter. This one wasn't in her mailbox. It was taped to the inside of her locker, slipped through the crack while she was out running drills. You don't get to ignore me forever. You owe me. We're not done. Soon. And that was when she knew. This wasn't just a letter. It was a hunt. And she was the quarry. Clara did what she always did. When fear tried to crawl into her bones, she fought back with action. That night, she called Captain Rayner, not as a superior officer, not even as her mentor, but as the man who had once pulled her out of hell and asked nothing in return. He answered on the first ring. You need to see something. She said simply. An hour later, they met in a diner on the far edge of town, the kind of place where the coffee is bad and the lights are dim enough to make secrets feel safe. She handed him the 2 letters. Rayner read them in silence, his expression unreadable. Then tucked them back into the bag. I'll notify threat assessment, he said. We'll get surveillance on your place. Make a formal file. I don't want a formal file, she said. He looked at her sharply. Clara, this isn't optional. No, she agreed. But this isn't about fear. It's about control. I won't give him the satisfaction of seeing me flinch. And what do you want? She paused. The question lingered. I want to face him, she said, surprising even herself. I want to look him in the eye, Not to forgive, not to forget, but to let him see that he didn't end me. I'm still here, that I'm stronger now. Leaned back. He didn't smile. But there was a glimmer of something, a deep, quiet approval. The kind that doesn't come from agreement, but from recognition. You've always been stronger than you think, he said, and that was when Clara realized. Maybe the letter wasn't a threat. Maybe it was an invitation to finish what she started all those years ago. Not with fists, not with fury, but with truth, with power. With the knowledge that this time she wasn't alone, and she wasn't broken. She was SWAT. She was ready, and if her past wanted a reckoning, she would deliver. It. On her terms. The final BRA's Clara didn't sleep the night after the second letter was delivered. She didn't pace, didn't cry, didn't rage. She simply sat in the quiet dark of her apartment, fully dressed, her badge and sidearm laid out on the kitchen table beside her like ancient relics from a life she had fought to construct. Around 2:17 a.m., she stood up, walked to the living room window, and stared at the empty street below, watching shadows stretch across the pavement, like memories she never invited. She had no proof Matthew was nearby. No camera had caught him. No one had seen him, but Clara knew him. She knew how he moved, how he watched, how he waited. His silence was never peace. It was prelude. And now her instincts screamed one thing over and over. He's not just watching, he's getting closer. The department's threat assessment team moved fast after Rayner submitted the letters, but not fast enough for Clara's liking. They assigned plainclothes patrols near her home, checked city registries for any vehicles or hotel reservations in Matthew's name, and even ran surveillance through the state's behavioral threat database. But the name Matthew, no last name, no concrete identifiers, was smoke in the system. The man had vanished years ago, and somehow now he'd re-emerged without a digital footprint. Clara knew why. He had always been good at erasing himself. Manipulation was his art form, control his weapon of choice. She requested something that wasn't on any department checklist. Permission to set a personal sting. It wasn't officially sanctioned, not on paper. But she had allies, now people like Rayner, Ortiz, and even Camila, who had watched her carry a child through fire and would now follow her through worse. I know him, Clara said, in a closed-room meeting with Rayner and the city's behavioral analyst. I know how he thinks. He won't come at me in a crowd. He'll isolate me. He'll want control. But more than anything, he'll want to believe I'm still afraid. So I'll give him that. What exactly are you proposing? The analyst asked cautiously. I want to lure him out, Clara said, her voice firm and unnervingly calm. I want him to think I'm alone, unguarded, vulnerable. Then we end this. Rayner didn't speak right away. When he finally did, his voice was low. You understand what you're walking into? Yes, Clara said. I'm not walking in as the woman he left behind. I'm walking in as who I've become. The plan was simple, but dangerous. Clara would isolate herself at a decoy residence, provided by the department, a safe house disguised as a sparse rental. Cameras would be positioned outside, and a secondary SWAT team would be stationed 1 block away. She wouldn't carry a firearm. Only a panic trigger embedded in a wearable that would call in the team once pressed. The goal wasn't to arrest Matthew mid-crime. The goal was to catch him entering the perimeter, establishing intent, and engaging in a premeditated violation of protective boundaries enough to ensure long-term legal action. They didn't know when or even if he would come, but he did. On the 4th night, just after 10:42 p.m., Clara sat in the dim kitchen of the safe house, sipping from a cup of decaf coffee, the kind that tasted like burnt cardboard but grounded her in the moment. She wore an oversized hoodie, her hair loose. The image of civilian exhaustion. Vulnerable, just as he would expect. That's when she heard it. It's a soft click of the back gate. It wasn't dramatic. There was no crash, no thump, just the subtle creak of wood under pressure. She didn't turn her head. She let the silence wrap around her like a net. Then came the sound of gravel under slow footsteps. Measured, quiet, calculated. A shadow passed by the window. Her hand reached slowly under the table where the panic trigger was hidden beneath duct tape. She didn't press it, not yet, the back. Doorknob turned. Still, she waited, and then it opened softly. Like it belonged to someone with the illusion of ownership, he stepped inside. It had been almost a decade, but Clara knew instantly. The posture, the scent of that same damn aftershave, the slight limp in his right leg he always tried to hide. Matthew, he smiled when he saw her. Not with warmth, with recognition. Like someone returning to a project they once abandoned. You always made things so hard, he said, as if picking up a conversation from years ago. Even now, you act like you're the one in control. Clara didn't respond. Not yet. She wanted him to speak, to confess. To incriminate, he took a step closer. I saw the news. The stories. You playing soldier? That's not you. You were always the quiet one. The one who needed someone strong. And you think I needed you? Her voice was even. I know you did. His smile widened. You survived because of me. I broke you in, made you see the world for what it is. She pressed the panic trigger. Outside, the team mobilized. Inside, Matthew kept talking. Can't fake strength, Clara. You can't pretend forever. Sooner or later, the mask slips. You'll always be that girl behind the gas station. Clara stood. It was the first moment he faltered. No, she said quietly. That girl didn't make it out. I buried her. And I built something better. He reached for something inside his jacket. It was his last move. The door burst open in a flash of controlled chaos. SWAT officers surged in, tackled him to the floor, zip-tied his hands behind his back. He screamed, thrashed, cursed. Clara didn't flinch. She stepped closer, looked him in the eye as he knelt, subdued and raging. I thought I was running from you, she said softly. Turns out I was running toward this moment. He tried to speak again, but she turned away before the words left his lips. She never needed to hear another word from him. He was no longer her story. He was her ending. And she had already begun the sequel that night. Clara didn't go home to a celebration or a drink or even sleep. She went to the same diner where she'd met Rayner, ordered a terrible cup of coffee, and sat in the corner booth by the window. Samila showed up wordless and slid into the seat across from her. They didn't speak for a while. Then Camila finally said, "So what now?" Clara stirred her coffee and looked out the window, where the night no longer felt heavy. Now, she said, I serve, not to prove I can, but because I want to. Camila smiled. You're not the quiet one anymore. No, Clara said, smiling back. Now I'm the one they hear coming, the end.